Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot, and in this video I want to give you some insights into which of the different minimas from the available approach charts to choose. So let's get started straight away. Over here we have the ILS chart for runway 23 right at Düsseldorf Airport, and if we want to fly an auto land, then we are obviously going to use the Cat 3A minima, which in this case is 50 feet radial. So keep in mind over here it says DH, which is decision height, so based off a radio altimeter, and then we're going to use 50 as that. The Category 2 minima is basically only used when the airport publishes that Category 2 approaches are in use and not Category 3A approaches. So only use this when you're actually going to do a Cat 2 landing. Now let's get to the most common place over here. That is the Category 1 approach. That is basically the standard ILS approach that you are going to fly, where you will eventually disconnect the autopilot and land the plane manually. On many approaches like these, there is only a single minima published. However, equally many have different minima published per airplane category. So if we look at this, we have Category Charlie 351, and then we have Category Delta 361. The numbers in brackets behind that are the respective radio altitude that corresponds to the barometric altitude that we see over here. So how do we know though if we are flying in Category Charlie or a Category Delta airplane? The classification between the two varies depending on the certification of the airplane. So in case of the Boeing 737, if you have an aircraft that's certified with a maximum landing weight of 65,317 kilograms, like for example many low-costers have certified their aircraft to, then you can see with this weight entered on the approach reference page that the VREF speed for flap 40, so basically the VREF for the max landing weight, is 141 knots. And the difference between a Category Charlie and a Category Delta airplane is always the VREF speed at the certified maximum landing weight. A Category Charlie airplane is between 120 to 141 knots, while a Category Delta airplane is from 141 upwards to 161. So that's the important little change over there. Other 737 operators may have certified the airplane to a higher landing weight of 66 and a bit tons. And as you can see, if we now enter a gross weight of 66 tons, the VREF speed of flap 40 becomes higher in that it becomes 142 knots now. So with that, the airplane is in a Category Delta range and you have to take the Category Delta minima. So which of those minimas to use depends on the certification of the airplane. Be aware that it does not depend on the actual landing weight of the plane. If you have a plane that's certified for more than 66.3 tons, then you will always use the Cat Delta minima, even if the actual landing weight is below that. Alright, so that much for the differences between the different minima. In our case, let's take 65.3 on 41 knots. Okay, so let's have a look at different approach types then, and what we can expect there. In this case, we also have the localizer minima on the chart up here, and this is what you would use in case you fly a localizer only approach with vertical guidance provided either by the airplane's VNAV system or by using vertical speed mode in order to follow the distance altitude table that we have on the approach chart over here. Keep in mind, most ILS charts are combined ILS or localizer charts, so they cover both the ILS approaches and the localizer approaches. In terms of which setting to use on the EFIS control panel of your aircraft, basically you always use barometric setting, except for Cat 3 and Cat 2 approaches, for which you are going to use the radial minima. From here on, let's go ahead and go forward to another airport, and in this case we are going to select Las Vegas for our next approach chart. And let's have a look into the RNAV 01 right chart over here. So, we've got a couple different minima published over here once again. We start with the LPV minima. Under the operations that my airline does, we are not certified for LPV approaches, so we cannot use this. So now we have to choose between LNAV VNAV and LNAV only minima. So this is a non-precision approach, as it is an RNAV approach, so you have to decide in which mode you are going to fly it. If you fly the approach either with IAN mode, that is pressing the approach button on the MCP so that the plane calculates, let's call it, semi-glide slope signals, then you use the LNAV VNAV minima. The same goes if you use the LNAV mode and the VNAV mode for the approach. In that case, you can use this minima up here. Things are different if you are not going to have vertical guidance provided by the airplane. So if you use LNAV in order to fly the approach track, but if you use vertical speed mode in order to descend on the approach. In that case, you are going to use the LNAV only minima. There are some airports that publish only LNAV minima for their approaches, and be aware that when you are using an LNAV minima, this is an MDA, so it is a minimum descent altitude. And this means this altitude must not be busted on the approach when you initiate a go-around. And for this very reason, operators have to decide on an addition that they're going to use on top of this minima, which their pilots are then going to use as the new minima. For most 737 operators, that is 40 feet. In other words, if you were to use this minima, the LNAV only minima, you would take 2,820, add 40 feet to that, so the new minima becomes 2,860. You are going to set 2,860 on the EFIS control panel in the cockpit, so that your airplane is going to call minimums at 2,860. The reason you do that is because if you press the toga button and follow the normal go-around procedures, your airplane is going to descend approximately 40 feet before it finally starts climbing due to the inertia of the plane. And by taking that into account, you are not going to descend below this minima on this approach. We need to look at one more case over here before we can close this up. And the next case we are going to look at is different missed approach gradients published. So let's go to Palma de Mallorca for the ILS approach on runway 06 right. Sorry, 06 left. So ILS 06 left, and going down, over here we are back to an ILS. And we can see we've got both Cap Charlie and Cap Delta minima published, so we need to choose accordingly. However, we have two different set of ILS minimas published over here. And the left one is based on a missed approach climb gradient of a minimum of 3%, as we can see over here. The right one is based on a missed approach climb gradient of a minimum of 2.5%. Therefore, depending on the aircraft that you are flying, you have to do your missed approach calculations with the applicable MACG. So let's have a look at how we do that. Over here we are in the virtual performance tool, and you can see I've selected Palma runway 06 right up in the list already. Now, you've got two different selections up here. You've got 06 left, Cat 1 DME 2.5%, and then you've got 06 left, Cat 1 DME 3%. The way this is done may vary per operator. There is a good chance that you may only get a single runway selection. So, for example, let's take the 3% minima up here. Then you can see on the missed approach climb gradient field, you can select a 3% minimum gradient. And then just enter the remainder of the data. I'm just going for demonstration purposes over here. So I've just entered ICAO standard conditions, landing weight 60 tons. And with the MACG that we have chosen over here, we hit calculate. We can see the thing does our landing performance correctly, so we can land. And since we have taken a 3% gradient and we see that we can land by looking at the figures below, we can basically head over to the charts and then use the 3% minima. And this is, for example, for the plane that we're sitting in right now, 274 feet. generally we can say that the higher the missed approach climb gradient, the lower the minima is going to be. Now, the reason we may do that is typically because there are some sort of obstacles, and the steeper you can climb in case of a missed approach with an engine failure, the lower your minima can be before you have to initiate a go-around, the very latest, in order to conduct a safe go-around. Now, there is another way how you can select this. So let's just take runway 6 right for demonstrational purposes here. If you go into the MACG field in the performance calculator, the default is 2.5%. That is what you have on the vast majority of approaches. But you can also click on the enter gradient field, and then you can enter basically any gradient that you may be looking for. So in case the gradient you are looking for is not contained in the list of different approaches available within the performance tool, you can always type your preferred gradient in here. For example, now I'm going for 3.0, click done, and now we're planning a 3% gradient. So that is the most common different minimas that you would find on approach charts. However, because we are pilots and because that means we may not be happy with everything being standardized, let's have a look into a special case over here. And for that we're going towards Palermo, and we'll take the VOR Zulu chart for runway 07. And yes, some authorities have some great ideas to add some stuff like, if you have a DME that has decimal readings included in your flight deck, you can use a minima of 710 feet. If you don't have a DME with decimal readings, why ever you would not have that, you need to use a higher minima. For stuff like this, different airport authorities around the world have all kind of different ideas, so these are not the norm. But you may from time to time run into some procedures that have strange requirements like this one, as in if you have a DME with decimal readings in your cockpit, like, okay, why ever you would not have that. Anyway, that is going to be the conclusion of today's video. I hope you found this one interesting. If you learned something new, then do let me know in the comments below the video what that was. If you want to support the channel, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And if you really like what I'm doing, you can support me through the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can find in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member, which is going to give you exclusive access to new videos before they are released to the general public. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to welcome you all again, hopefully very soon.